After a dominant decade full of coasters, 1990 would be a smaller year with just two boomerangs at Parque de Atracciones de Montjuic and Knott's Berry Farm, and a final tornado at Aventure Park Hellendoorn, but it was all in preparation for bigger things. After Hershey Park's Boomerang Sidewinder, the rest of 1991 would be Vekoma's first experiment building fully children's coasters. After building more family-friendly layouts with the MK700 and 900 coasters, Vekoma would debut 3 new layouts for their new junior coaster. These would all use a similar track to the MK700 coasters and single-car trains with a shared lap bar. The first and smallest of these to open would be Octorbahn at Rostiland, with a layout that would be known as the 207-meter junior coaster. This under 30-foot tall layout would travel a tiny course with gentle turns and a helix finale. The second would be the 335-meter coaster, which would be nearly twice as long and tall, and featured a bit more intense layout with more sustained forces. This would open as Roller Skater at Melly Park, with a shoe-themed train that would be used on many other coasters in the future. The final would be a custom layout also named Roller Skater at Fanfari. This would be an indoor layout twice as long as the 207-meter model, with a small pre-lift section and much larger turns and drops than the other two juniors of the year. The ride also used a small tire boost section and a sharp hill towards the end as it toured the Family Entertainment Center. While on paper these may seem like any other kids' coasters, Vekoma was making their statement in the always needed children coaster world, and besides Zaire, the market was largely untapped and ready to expand. The next year would feature, you guessed it, another boomerang at Vienna Prater, as well as 3 more junior coasters. 2 more 335-meter models would open at West Midlands Safari Park and Farup Summerland, as well as Vekoma's tiniest coaster yet with the new 85-meter model. Rollshoe Coaster would open at Fiesta Texas with an extremely simple oval layout over a hill, but also opening in 1992 would be the immaculately themed Euro Disneyland, where Vekoma would build one of their most amazing coasters yet, Space Mountain. Oh wait, not that one yet. This Space Mountain would be an indoor MK700 at Formosan Aboriginal Culture Village as yet another indoor space-themed coaster. The ride would travel through a very familiar light tunnel before a tame layout with intergalactic effects. Actually opening at Euro Disneyland would be the debut of a new model for Vekoma and their first coaster at a Disney park. After Arrow's mine trains had recently gotten a second boost in popularity, Vekoma would debut their own take on the model on the 4th and final version of Big Thunder Mountain in the world. Unlike those before it, this mountain was located on an island, requiring the train to go under the river to get there and back from the main path. Once on the mountain, the runaway train would complete a familiar layout before an elongated drop back underwater to return to the station. This picturesque ride is widely considered the best version of Big Thunder and would not be the only mine train for the year. Colorado would open at Walibi Wavre with a layout that would be cloned multiple times, making this the first 785-meter mine train. This would travel a similar themed landscape to Big Thunder, with rockwork, 2 parallel lifts, and 2 large helixes. In 1993, Vekoma would break their record for most coasters in a year again with 13, 11 of which being an abundance of junior coasters. The 335-meter layout would receive an installation at Liufu Village, along with 5 207-meter layouts around the world, including Gadget's Go Coaster at Disneyland. There would also be a second and final tiny 85-meter model at Taiwan's Window on the World theme park. That same park would also open a custom layout named Laser Blaster, with an indoor layout and fun lights. This would be one of 4 custom junior layouts that year, along with a tiny unnamed coaster in a mall in Brazil. Rascender Roland would be perhaps the best junior yet, with a more exciting layout starting with a large helix and interacting with the park's Schwarzkopf Nessie. The coaster would also feature a mine train lead car that would be featured on a handful of junior coasters that year. Space Adventure would open alongside one of the 207-meter coasters of the year at Kumdori Land with 2 lifts into a large dome for another fun but hard to tell indoor layout with turns. Kumdori Land was not finished though, as they would debut a 3rd Vekoma for the year, and by far the biggest, with Black Hole Express. This custom MK1200 would open as Vekoma's tallest coaster by far, with a massive 170-foot lift along the hillside, making it the 6th tallest coaster in the world upon opening. The behemoth would begin spiraling down a helix directly into 2 massive vertical loops. After hitting a mid-course, the coaster would dive into a reverse sidewinder and a turn through a tunnel before a double helix finale. Oh, and there was another boomerang in the UK. While 1994 would feature fewer coasters than the previous year, it would be more diverse, with 6 coasters, all of which being different models. There would be yet another boomerang in Qatar named Thunderbolt, and another 207-meter junior at Kentucky Kingdom. More uniquely, Vienna Prater would open the final single-file MK700 coaster with a very compact footprint. Unlike the giant long trains that had been experimented with this model in the past, Megablitz would feature a tiny 3-car train and travel through 3 super intense large helixes. Mack Rides and Zamperla had dominated the powered coaster market for the last decade, but Disney would still trust Vekoma to build a one-off powered coaster as an update to a Disneyland classic. Casey Jr. Le Petit Train du Cirque would be a bit faster, but still tame version of the iconic ride at the now named Disneyland Paris, and would travel a similar landscape over a beautiful miniature storybook land. Interestingly, there would also be a 3rd and final swinging turns in Grampus Jet at Greenland, but this ending would lead to a new generation of hanging coaster. Just 2 years before, a brand new Swiss manufacturer, Bolliger & Mabillard, would change the coaster world forever with the revolutionary Batman the Ride. Unlike Aero and Vekoma's suspended coasters, this fixed train would not swing and be way more thrilling, being capable of completing many inversions. This model, as well as B&M's other smoother, sleeker tracked coasters, made the more janky Vekomas of the past look antiquated in comparison. While Vekoma had plenty of experience building their version of Aero coasters, they were stepping into a whole new ballpark when they attempted their own inverted coaster, which they called the Suspended Looping Coaster. Their quickly made prototype would open as El Condor at Walibi Flavo, taking up a small footprint and matching Batman the Ride's height, speed, and inversions with 5. The brand new 2-wide train would also use far bulkier, comically large over-the-shoulder restraints, which allowed for even less visual freedom. The SLC would drop into a brand new eye-catching inversion called a rollover, consisting of a sidewinder-like flip upwards and a second roll directly after, for a double flip in the air. After this, the coaster would fly through an elevated bank turn and a full sidewinder before a double inline twist finale. Unlike the classic corkscrews, the inline twists would be a tighter spiral and mimicked the 0G roll B&M had developed for Batman. I also forgot to mention, the SLC was one of the worst tracking and roughest coasters made. Vekoma was not known for their smooth rides by any means, but the SLC in particular was an ambitious attempt at a highly thrilling ride that featured more advanced inversions than they had ever attempted before. But as you'll see, the cheaper price, and most importantly, mass production availability that they had shown over the years would lead to this being nearly as popular as the boomerang over the following decade. Vekoma would outdo themselves again in 1995 with another 16 coasters, including 2 more boomerangs in South Korea and Uzbekistan. These would open alongside 5 more junior coasters, with 2 207-meter coasters and 3 custom indoor layouts. These would all go around rides inside the malls or parks, with the order of intensity going to the ones in Malaysia, Brazil, and Indonesia. But the real numbers would come from the explosion of the SLC, as 8 would open all around the world. The identical 662-meter layout used for El Condor would be repeated on T2 at Kentucky Kingdom, and all others this year would receive a slightly updated layout. The new version would feature a slightly taller height and an S-turn finale replacing the hill, and this modified 689-meter layout would open at 5 parks. I gotta say, the SLCs this year featured some incredible names, with Top Gun, F2 Fright Flight, Blackout, Mind Eraser, and Hangman. A very slightly modified version would be squeezed into Maury's Piers with the Great Nor'easter, making this technically a custom layout. On top of all of these, Lethal Weapon the Ride would open with a 4th 765-meter layout that would add a low helix before the brake run. But this abundance of coasters would pale to the final coaster of the year, which would be the 4th in a row at a Disney park and the 3rd in Paris. Since the inception of roller coasters, virtually all followed a traditional gravity path with a lift at either the beginning or end. As mentioned, in 1977, both Schwarzkopf and Arrow would debut their singular looping shuttle coasters with a launch propulsion system. Schwarzkopf would begin by using a weight drop system attached to a pulley before changing to a flywheel with a similar effect. Arrows, on the other hand, would use a less powerful electric winch to drop the train off an elevated platform through a loop and back. Taking inspiration from the company who started it all for them, Vekoma would use the electric winch to develop their own launch for Space Mountain, de la Terre à la Lune. The traditional MK-1200 trains would not only be decorated in an incredible style, but would also feature onboard audio, a first for a large-scale coaster. The trains would rocket out of a jaw-dropping cannon into the indoor structure and through a long turn before a sidewinder. Trains would then continue to rocket along before a corkscrew and a small lift, before a unique element called the tongue, a cutback-like inversion. In terms of an overall package, Space Mountain may have been the most incredible coaster in the world at the time, with immaculate Jules Verne theming, cutting-edge technology, and a thrilling layout. The ride not only became Vekoma's biggest feather in their cap, but also saved the struggling Disneyland Paris, which the mouse certainly took note of. After another large rollout, Vekoma would have another prosperous year fleshing out their portfolio with another 13 coasters. The boomerangs just keep on coming, with installations in the US, Chile, and Brunei. Along with these would be yet another 689-meter SLC in Japan, as well as a second and final hurricane named Joker's Revenge at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. The junior coasters of the year would be made up by 2 more 207 meters in Germany and the UAE, and 4 more custom layouts. Vekoma would continue their relationship with Disney with Barnstormer at the Magic Kingdom, a slightly modified and mirrored 207-meter layout. The other 3 were more interesting, starting with Space Switchback. Located inside Shanghai's iconic Oriental Pearl Tower, this would drop right out of the station into another well-themed intergalactic layout before a lift hill to bring it back. Real Rat would open with a creepy sewer theme and a crazy lead car, with a basic indoor layout and a turn outside. The final would be Tatilya Express in Turkey, with to this day the longest layout Vekoma has ever done for a junior coaster, with 1,853 feet of track. This ride looks to be inspired by Zaire's large indoor Tivoli coasters, as the coaster snaked its way through the large indoor theme park. Along those tamer rides would be the second custom mine train coaster, Colorado Adventure at Phantasialand. Billed as the Michael Jackson thrill ride for the musician's love of the coaster, the train would wind in and around rockwork and buildings in Vekoma's new longest layout, surpassing 4,000 feet of track. The final of the year would be another new model which would look familiar at first glance. The mysterious X, No Way Out, would be the first Enigma coaster, using essentially junior coaster trains to travel backwards through a fully indoor layout in a pyramid. The basic layout would be plussed with lighting effects and music throughout, and go through different themes. To this point, Vekoma was on an absolute tear in terms of dominance in numbers in the coaster world. In their short 17 years of existence, they had installed over 100 coasters, averaging around 6 a year, but this next stretch of coasters over the next 3 years was truly something special. After constantly breaking their record for the most coasters in a year, they would hit a huge mark of 18 coasters for 1997. This would unsurprisingly include another 4 boomerangs in the United States, Brazil, and Egypt. After only one SLC the previous year, the model would return in a huge way, with 6 689-meter layouts around the world, and another 765-meter with Helix in Spain. Alongside those 7 SLCs would be an ever so slightly new layout, with the 787-meter extended on Pusing Lagi. The order of elements and stats are identical to the 765-meter, but features small tweaks given the park space. The junior coasters of the year would consist of 1 335-meter and 2 207s, along with 2 more custom layouts. These would be 2 more indoor coasters, with Montanha Russa in Portugal and the longer Extreme Coaster in the Philippines. The final of the year would be yet another new model and a natural evolution of Vekoma's existing models. The Boomerang and SLC had proven to be their most successful thrilling coasters, so naturally, Vekoma would combine these two to create the Invertigo. Using the shuttle spikes, loop, and cobra roll layout of the Boomerang and the inverted trains and restraints of the SLC, this was a no-brainer of a model. To switch things up, each car would have back-to-back seating, allowing riders to face each other while completing the layout. After a bit of a delay, this would open as Hangover at Leesburg. Matching their incredible 18 coasters of the previous year, Vekoma would have another massive year, but with an even wider diversity of models in 1998. If your park didn't have a Boomerang yet, you would think it would have one now, with somehow 5 more opening in the United States, China, and Argentina. Along with the standards would be another Invertigo at Paramount's Great America and 3 more SLCs. A standard 689-meter would open at Geauga Lake, as well as 2 more 765 meters with Helix at Gardaland and Ratanga Junction. That park would also open a mine train clone of Calamity Mine with the 785-meter layout, as well as the first junior coaster of the year, a 335-meter. 1 more of these would open in China as well, and be joined by 4 more 207-meter layouts and 1 custom layout. Vapor Trail at Sesame Place would complete 3 helices before turning into the brakes. The big custom layout would come from a model not seen for nearly a decade, with a custom MK900 in Vogelrock at Efteling. Using the onboard audio of Space Mountain, the simple indoor layout would dodge giant birds with a fantasy theme. After nearly 40 coasters over the last 2 years, the demand for new rides could not be stopped, as for a third year in a row, Vekoma would open an insane 18 coasters around the world. With roller coaster design evolving, Vekoma would say goodbye to one of their original models with the final custom MK1200. Millennium Roller Coaster would open a year before the new millennium at Fantasy Island in the UK. The 150-foot tall coaster would feature just 3 inversions, 2 loops and a sidewinder, and then snake above the flea market. After that would be yet another 2 boomerangs in Colorado and Texas, as well as already the last 2 Invertigo coasters at Six Flags America and Paramount's Kings Island. After another slower year for the SLC, another 7 would open, including 6 more 689-meter layouts. These would have another roster of great names, including Limit, Serial Thriller, and Traumatizer. Also opening would be the 5th and final 765-meter with Helix, simply named Roller Coaster at Dream Island in Egypt. That park would also open 2 junior coasters, including the 2nd and final Enigma named Dark Ride. This ride begins with 2 lift hills before many helixes in the dark, and is joined by the 335-meter Family Coaster, one of the 2 for the year, along with Woodstock Express at Cedar Point. The other junior coasters would be the 207-meter Woody Woodpecker's Nuthouse Coaster at Universal Studios Florida and custom Dragon at the new Legoland California, which would begin with a small dark ride segment before a simple terrain-hugging layout. The final of the year and the decade would be another major coaster for Vekoma's new favorite customer, Disney. In the time since Space Mountain had opened, many other manufacturers had begun to experiment with launch coasters, and they found the new most reliable method was using magnets. Vekoma would attempt a version of this on Rock and Roller Coaster at Disney's MGM Studios, and unlike Space Mountain, it would use a flat LSM launch with a catch car to reach a much faster 57 miles per hour. This would rocket into a brand new element called a Sea Serpent roll, which would enter similar to a Cobra roll, but exit the second sidewinder in an opposite direction, continuing the path rather than turning the train around. After that, the coaster would complete many turns indoors, as well as a corkscrew, while having onboard audio of Aerosmith blasting through the chaotic layout. This huge thrilling coaster at a Disney park would be yet another win for Vekoma, and conclude an unbelievable decade of 116 new roller coasters around the world.